Heidi Sieck, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today to be interviewed by me. Here we are doing this by Skype. You're in New York, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so you're an activist for social change. You've done a lot of work in the social arena. You're a civic entrepreneur, someone who's brought 25 years of innovation and activism into the intersection of technology, politics, and well-being, and also working at elevating women to positions of leadership. So we have a lot to drill down to. I want to kind of be able to delve into this. But first, as I always like to do with people I interview, I'd like to just ask you a little bit about your own personal journey. Most of us aren't born enlightened, so how you landed to where you are today.
Oh, I certainly thank you, Michael. I'm happy to be here and talking about these important issues today, particularly in this political environment that we're in, and everyone's really struggling with what they're having to face in terms of their own personal safety, spiritual well-being, and the things that they're seeing in society today. And I certainly am really grateful that I get an opportunity to be able to work on a lot of these issues to try to make the world a better place. And in a lot of ways, that's what I've always done. I wouldn't say that I'm enlightened by any stretch of the imagination, but I do certainly believe that we have all had important experiences that lead us to a path of service. And I'd say that's my story. It's always been a path of service.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, actually, in a town of 1,200 people in a cornfield, with adults around me who were all committed to public service. Every one of them, the women in my family were teachers. The men were all elected officials, actually, as well as civil servants. So, and entrepreneurs. I had one set of grandparents who owned a restaurant in a tiny town of 600 people, and we were all raised in the restaurant. My other grandfather was a state senator. So if you can see, as we talk about our journey, you'll see how those themes run along all of the things that I've done. And I'm certainly will hit some of those. But I think more importantly, because of mentorship and because the women in my family were very devoted to education, they were teachers, but they were also women that had a focus on learning and growing constantly, that it gave me a real view of not staying where I was, to continue to grow and explore and learn. And one of the things that I did notice was that they had, my mother and my grandmother particularly, had made a lot of decisions about their lives and hadn't followed their dreams based on some choices that they made about how, the children that they had had, and how many children that they had had, and that's one of the reasons why I work so much in reproductive health and I'm a pro-choice activist, is because in seeing the path that the women in my family took, I want all women to have an opportunity to make choices for their lives based on their own dreams and their own wishes for themselves, not about the access they have to reproductive health care services. So there are lots of themes, but that's a lot of the reason why I am who I am and what I do today.
Yeah, so you had a lot of role models in different ways. Some that made you, spurred you to go in, not in that direction, but the more forward direction, perhaps. Yeah.
I would say that what's most important for me are the women who were also mentoring me, and that was really key. And we can talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, and so how did you get your start in the political arena?
It's a fun story. My grandpa was a state senator, so we grew up in the state capitol in Nebraska. So we used to go to the unicameral and hang out on the floor of the Senate for fun. And it was always all the cousins, we would fight for who would get a chance to sit on Grandpa's lap on the floor of the Senate. I'm sure it was against the rules. I'm sure it was against the rules. But it was always really special when you got to sit there with him. He would often have us there during floor debates, and he would let us push the button for the vote. And so you could see the little light, it was my grandpa Sieck, so it was my same last name. So you could see the little light go on when you voted yes or no up on the screen above the unicameral, the front of the big room, the big marble room. So it was really fun. And I also have a really great story about that. It's one of the ones that I think really reflected on my journey in politics, which is, I remember I was sitting on my grandpa's lap, and he was getting into a heated debate with one of the other senators that was sitting behind him. And I recall, I think, my family tells me it was about agricultural policy or something like that. But they were in a heated debate. And when it was over, I turned around to the senator behind my grandpa and shook my finger at him and said, "Don't be mean to my grandpa." And it caused a huge uproar on the floor of the Senate. And my grandpa was so sweet. He sat me down in his lap and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Don't worry, Heidi. We're still friends. We just don't agree on policy. That's what politics is."
Uh-huh.
And it was a really defining moment for me. I always remembered that. And there was just something about that clarity that I'd always been involved ever since in politics. I feel very comfortable in marble buildings.
Yeah. That's a really cool story. And you weren't censured or anything by the Nebraska state.
Not that I recall. I forget. I wonder if they didn't. Grandpa never took one of my cousins or me on the floor again. I don't remember ever going back on the floor after that. I think I was about 7 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great to have grown up and see politics as a public service and a calling, because so many people are cynical about the system and just lump all politicians together as all corrupt and crooks and jerks and idiots and all that. But you see people, you saw it firsthand, people, and perhaps there was a mix of that in Nebraska, but at least you saw.
Well, sadly, that was 35 years ago, so things have changed.
Yeah.
My grandpa was a Democrat, a gentleman farmer who was well respected and really was focused on education and public service and healthcare at the time. Senator Bob Kerrey was governor at the time, who became our U.S. senator, and he too was a Democrat who was focused on growing economy, entrepreneurship, small business, proper agricultural policy, and so things certainly have changed. I'm very lucky to have had that experience and mentorship that I've had, but we know that it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of those politicians who are willing to work as they did, my family being Democrats in Nebraska, my family being very pro-choice and pro-woman, is a different story now.
Yeah, and that brings to mind your neighboring state, Kansas, and Thomas Frank's book, "What's the Matter with Kansas?" And in his book, and it probably could have written "What's the Matter with Nebraska?" Kansas was a state that was within the Midwest sensibility, progressive, farmer, democratic-oriented labor, and then things changed. We could go on about what changed, and I think you and I probably know a good amount of it. But yeah, so you saw Nebraska in its kind of heyday.
Yeah, we had 2 Democratic senators at the time as I was growing up, and that was just the structure of our family. So that's what I bring to all the work that I do.
Yeah. So growing up like that, were you thinking in going to school, going to college, were you thinking, oh, the political arena is really where I want to work, make my mark?
Yeah. I graduated from the University of Nebraska, and the week after I graduated, I bought a one-way ticket to Washington, D.C. And I started working on my U.S. senators in Bob Kerry's office, actually. It was serendipity, actually, that and this is where I think some of the conversation we're going to have around the journey, which will lead to some of our next discussion. when I was working in Bob Kerry's office, I I also got a job working in the Law and Regulatory Affairs Office of AT&T, which started my curiosity of technology's role in both society as well as the political side of tech.
Mm-hmm.
So I really was fortunate to have these two opportunities, and I'll say, like, life is all about choices and forks in the road, and so each. I think we can all agree that we can look back and see that if I had taken this path, this would have happened. If I had taken this path, this would have happened. So I had this choice between a paid position at my senator's office, in Bob Kerry's office, or a paid position as a researcher for AT&T. And one of the positions, the AT&T positions, paid $2,000 more than the other position, and I took it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had taken the other path, things might have been different. But that's how technology happened. It just happened,
Yeah.
you know. And so that's how the technological aspect of my career happened. And it's funny, I was sitting in New York City in October, a couple of weeks before the election, feeling a little like overwhelmed. I was working on an electoral project. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, and what's going to happen, and oh my gosh, Donald Trump, and I didn't know which way the election was going to go, and feeling really stressed out. And I'm sitting there in this restaurant in New York City, and Bob Kerry walks in.
Wow,
and
it was serendipity.
It was one of those moments where life is a spiral, And we saw each other, and we greeted each other, and I said, I'm sitting here thinking, like, you're the one that started all this for me.
Oh.
So it was really one of those special moments of honoring the journey.
Oh, that's a interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun story.
Mm-hmm.
So you're bringing up, your technology kind of, I don't know, apprenticeship. I mean, working for AT&T. And then you got involved in technology in San Francisco with the 311, we call it the 311 Customer Service Center,
Yeah.
which was kind of setting the foundations of open government technology, open government in general. Is that a good approximation of the project itself?
Yeah, the intention of 311 was a deep, profound transformation in service, and for the city of San Francisco. And I'll give credit to Mayor Gavin Newsom for really being the one to bring that to San Francisco. He's the current Lieutenant Governor of California, and will be running for governor.
Right.
And he was mayor at the time, and he was a very innovative mayor who looked at best practices in city operations and was really willing to take a look at how technology could transform things. And we're talking about 2004, which is a while ago, and a lot of the technology that we know as government tech or civic tech is really transformed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we were building upon, going back to the Telecom Act of 1996, the result of that was an open telecom systems, opening up local and long distance markets, and really providing an opportunity for us to build super high speed wires in the ground. And as a result of that, there was certainly a need to innovate government tech at the time. And my story was that during the first telecom boom, or the first internet boom and bust, I happened to be in that wired infrastructure business. So the city of San Francisco was a place that was looking at innovative uses of tech in government, and thank God that they were hiring at the time, because I was a refugee of the first internet boom, and as well as Washington, D.C. So I was really happy to have that opportunity. And serendipity is that Mayor Newsom was really interested in innovative uses of tech. So what 311 was about was making technology ensure that government worked better for citizens, businesses, undocumented residents, everybody in San Francisco. And at the time, there were 2,500 listed numbers that you could use to contact your government in the yellow pages. And that's just ludicrous. So we were going off the best practices of New York, Chicago, and Baltimore, and we just believed that if San Francisco was going to be continue to be an innovative city, that we needed to have innovative technology to allow you to connect with the government. And in making it easier for citizens, businesses, visitors, undocumented residents to connect to their city government, we also coalesced a lot of data about how citizens were and callers were using government. And that really allowed us to provide all this data to the technology innovators. So Mayor Newsom was working with the Obama administration at the time, which was a very new administration and really interested in tech. And they actually launched the open data concept and program that they started at the White House from San Francisco 311, because we had this platform that had such great data sets about how fast are the potholes being filled, where are the hotspots in crime, where are the nonviolent crime being reported, how quickly are these water main breaks being reported. It's just all sorts of how fast are the buses getting to where they're supposed to be. All sorts of different things, and we started to realize how powerful those data sets could be, and that's how it all started.
Yeah, and you're bringing that up because I'm glad you brought up the connection between San Francisco, Gavin Newsom, and Barack Obama, because I wondered if he got his inspiration, what the connection may be, because I know President Obama was very big on tech, named a chief technology officer, really upped the whole Office of Technology, and it's really a nonpartisan issue. It's how can government serve citizens, and how can there be an interactive relationship. And now we've seen, the news is out that the Office of Technology is being cut back, and there is no chief technology officer, and it kind of ties in with the opposite, like that Office of Technology, Barack Obama's approach, philosophy, Gavin Newsom's philosophy of kind of more open government, open culture. The lack of it that we're seeing right now is kind of ties in with a closed type culture that we're seeing in our present administration, between lies and fake news and try to obstruct and all that. But yeah, at least you were.
Michael, I mean, let's think about that. How grateful we need to be that open data, open government phase happened, because yes, the presidential office, I can't call this person the president. It's just too much. No. But the White House is shutting down a lot of those data sets. But thank God that they had already been downloaded by a lot of folks that were in the open data movement, that they had been saving a lot of the data and protecting it, and that so much of it is already available, downloaded, and being used in other places. It's a very distributed model. We will lose a lot. There is no doubt we have lost a lot of data already. However, thank goodness that there was open sets for as long as there were. What if that hadn't been true?
Right.
There's a lot of hope in what can be rebuilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the beauty of any sort of open data, open culture, is that things become decentralized. So even if the centralization tries to shut things down, things have spread. So we'll continue. So yeah, so at the beginning, Heidi, in talking about your background, I mentioned that you brought 25 years of innovation and activism to this intersection of technology, politics, and well-being. And so I'm interested in I work in the field of well-being, healing, health. From your perspective, what is that intersection of technology, politics, and well-being?
Well, interesting. It's interesting that this question comes after our previous conversation, which is I led the project, the 311 customer service project. It was an extraordinarily large, difficult project. It was a $25 million transformational government project. It took about 7 years of my career to do it. We did launch it from Mayor Newsom's inauguration to the launch day. I think we did it in about 3 years. But there had been 4 years of research and work when he had been a member of the Board of Supervisors before that. And upon launch, I was so burned out. We did launch on time and under budget. It was an extraordinary feat. It worked. No one actually truly believed that at the time, I was a 31-year-old woman who had pulled this off. But it had a lot of cost to my health and well-being and the balance in my life. So after this had launched, I had to step back and take a look at what I wanted to do next because I was burned out. Yeah. I was unhealthy. I was chain smoking cigarettes. I was overweight. I had just a lot of imbalance as a result of workaholism to serve my community. And so it really forced me to take a look at what do I do? So this is really when my own personal well-being journey happened, where I studied meditation. I started really looking at health and wellness, and started having my own personal inquiry about what do I want my life to be about. And that became where the purpose work came in. What am I doing here? And after 311, I had all this opportunity. I had all these projects coming at me. I had all of this political campaigns and all of this stuff. Like, how do I decide how to serve? And really, in that process, I had a couple of realizations, which was the story is that I was reading a book. It was a Henry David Thoreau book called Walden, and there was a chapter in it that was entitled Philanthropy, and it was talking about service. And it was about why people serve. Do they serve because they're rich and they want to feel better about giving money? And there was a sentence in there that said, "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, but one who's striking at the root." And when I was thinking about that, it really struck me of how do I want to serve? I want to be a person that strikes at the root. One of the things about 311 that really inspired me was that it wasn't just about customer service. It was about transforming the system of government for people. That the millions of people that were calling into their government were having a transformative experience, and it has transformed city government forever because it was in a systemic, foundational way. So I started looking at all of the next projects that I worked on and thinking about democracy as a whole and systems as a whole and politics as a whole and saying, all right, what are the most root-striking practices? What are the most root-striking projects? What can transform things from the core? And the answer I came up with is the way to transform systemic politics from a systemic level is to elevate women to positions of leadership. Across the board, if you have, and I would say more diverse perspective. So across the board, we know from social science and all kinds of different studies, if you have diverse perspectives sitting in positions of decision-making authority, that you will get better outcomes for more people. And that includes like a political perspective, it includes race and socioeconomic perspective, includes all things. But for me, the most clear diversity that needs to be addressed immediately is gender. Women make up 51% of the planet. They are 51% of the human beings that government is trying to serve, and we are not being served. And so that's where I shifted my perspective, both in terms of taking care of myself, but also about women must be elevated into leadership. That is where the direction went for me. And because of my technology background, the projects that I've worked on since use technology to elevate the leadership advancement of women.
Oh, wow. Well, that's great.
So it's hard to see the thread when you look at my resume or who I am, but that's really
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So because you brought it from the personal perspective of like understanding you had to nurture yourself. You know, you were burnt out and not taking care of yourself. So in nurturing yourself, kind of also understanding the role of, yeah, not to be stereotypical, but that the yin quality, the
Yes.
nurturer, which can be male or female, but you know the way you're trying to now manifest that. So how are then, you know, with this vision and ideal, how are you trying to or working on seeing this play out?
Well, now there's a couple of things that happened. I eventually went to get my master's degree at the Harvard Kennedy School, and while I was there, I really did have a what I would say a feminist awakening that there is a way to use all of these pieces of technology, well-being, and politics, and to really transform systems. So that's when I actually I joined a team from my graduating class, and that had been incubating an idea out of the Harvard iLab to create a platform called democracy.com. And it was a platform that made it easier, using technology to make it easier for people to run for office, to try to democratize democracy. So that's where we started. I was the founding COO of a platform called democracy.com.
Which is an active website, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's currently dormant. It's interesting. We couldn't raise the money we needed to build this platform, so we're still looking for it.
Yeah.
But it really was, for me, it was like, how can we use technology to help folks that say, how can I serve? And it's mostly women that start. They'll be sitting around looking at their communities and say, I want to run for school board. And there was this one woman in North Dakota that contacted us and was like, I'm really upset about this bond measure that didn't go through in my community, and I want to run for school board. And we were able to set her up and get her running for office within a few minutes. So that was really the idea of democracy.com. But at the time, I had also been working on, right before this, I'd worked on the Obama campaign in 2012, where I met a woman named Carrie Kelly, who was doing a project called Yoga Votes that was bringing yoga practitioners together to look at ballots and to try to bring the principles of well-being into their voting behavior. And I thought, that's crazy. You know, like, what? Yoga votes? That's so nutty. You know, meanwhile, I'm practicing yoga in Ohio. And what I realized, as thousands of people were showing up to practice yoga and look at their ballot, there was something there. There was something there about people desperately really wanting to engage in politics through a lens of well-being and shared practice. So that's where Carrie and I got together and helped start this platform called CTZNWELL. So democracy.com and CTZNWELL kind of happened at the same time. So that's where we started really exploring what those connections were.
And CTZNWELL is an active website?
Yeah, that is an active platform of people that have a practice of well-being and how do they engage in political action.
What's the website? The name of
it? CTZNWELL, STZNWELL.
.org. That's
Yeah.
great. So that definitely is the intersection of politics, well-being, and technology right there. And is it something that is also encouraging women to run for office, or is that?
No, that's the work that I do. Yeah. CTZNWELL does the well-being and technology and politics, but I focus a lot on projects that elevate women. And I will say, as we started this conversation, I serve on the board of CTZNWELL, but as we started this conversation and just me describing how I started, it became very clear to me that an even more foundational issue of getting more women elected to office and elevating women to positions of leadership, of which I've been involved in many organizations, like Merge America and VoteRunLead, and done trainings myself. that it is impossible for women to be able to have the flexibility and to step into these positions of leadership without access to reproductive health care services and be able to choose how they plan their families. So this is where I became even more of an advocate for reproductive rights, reproductive freedom, reproductive justice.
Yeah.
And that's where my career took another pivot to be even more foundational.
Uh-huh. And that's the organization you founded or involved in, VoteProChoice.
VoteProChoice, that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that you play an active role with that organization.
I'm the founder, yeah. The
co-founder
and CEO, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's a crazy thing. I have all these men making rules about what to do.
It's totally unacceptable. And here's the really fascinating piece of the society that we live in, which is 70% of American voters do believe that women should have access to reproductive health care services and abortion specifically that is accessible, legal, affordable, and without shame. This is very clear research. 70%, 7 in 10 American voters believe that this should be an available service to women. Mm-hmm. However, if you look at our federal government now, if you look at the state legislatures, if you look at the policies that are enacted, you look at this craziness of the U.S. Senate just pulled one of their senators out of the hospital so Mike Pence could cast a tie vote to be able to defund Planned Parenthood in the U.S. Senate yesterday. This is like completely outside of the will of the American voter.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I brought up the book, What's the Matter with Kansas? I don't know if you've ever read it, but Thomas Frank, the author, talks about the evolution of Kansas, how it went from a democratic, progressive farmer labor state to what it is now. And he talked about that there were two, I forgot the hierarchy, but there were the social issues, the political conservatives, and the social issues, abortion being one of them, and the politicians always knew, as we see, the wedge issues will get people fired up, and they would get people fired up to vote for them, the conservatives, every election, but never want to really do anything, so they could, they would always have it on the precipice so they can continue to have the issue. So, demagoguery at its finest, because really, as you say, 70% of the population where they stand. And it's really, it should not be this polemical issue that it is.
No, it shouldn't. And there's a lot of ways that one can explore the reasons why. Mm-hmm. Certainly, there's a lot to do with the influence of social conservative religious organizations. Mm-hmm. Certainly, a lot of the perspectives of the party and how they pushed this. However, I also think that there is responsibility from the reproductive rights movement who have not properly communicated the reality of the issue of reproductive rights, reproductive justice, and access to abortion. 1 in 3 women have terminated a pregnancy before the age of 45. That includes Republicans and Democrats. 1 in 3. 1 in 3. And that is something we all have to think about. This is actually also an issue of economic freedom. It's an issue of economic productivity. It's an issue of access to social services. And people want to put the issue of abortion into this sort of little box of that's a single issue, like that's something over in the corner, but it's not. It's actually a foundational issue. It is one of the most foundational issues, like the environment, because we're talking about 51% of the planet and their ability to make decisions about the way that they want to contribute into the world, the way that they want to structure their families, the choices that they want to have for their lives or their education or their work or their ability to step into positions of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a kind of a perspective of foundational transformation that I'm looking at now.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, and you talking about that reminded me of the item in the news a couple of weeks ago. The conservative firebrand political TV commentator, the young woman Tomi Lahren.
Oh yeah,
Remember that? And she's a you know she calls herself a conservative, moderate, libertarian. I don't know what, but she went on the View TV and she said women should have pro-choice. I don't want the government telling me what to do.
yeah,
And she was suspended from her perch on Blaze TV and caught fire, caught hell from people on Twitter. And it was just
yeah.
yeah, what a
And I think it's important that this particular issue has fired up a small portion of our society. It's a very loud portion who are activated and motivated and have used platforms and bully pulpit in a lot of ways, but it actually isn't the perspective of the mainstream. I think a lot of people need to remember that just because it's the loudest voice doesn't mean that it is the will of all of us. And so 70% of American voters believe a woman should have access to reproductive health care services that's safe, legal, affordable, accessible, and without shame. 70%.
yeah.
So where is the power? Where is the voice?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really that's the real transformation that we need to look at now.
Yeah, and so for you, that using that impetus to help elevate women to positions of leadership, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so one last thing on this issue, I heard from a number of women, but women personally or hearsay or maybe even through media, like some women voted for Donald Trump because of the abortion issue. They didn't like anything else about him, but that's just crazy that people could be so and that's why these wedge issues are so visceral that people will think irrationally. So
Well, it's funny. I'm the board chair of the National Institute for Reproductive Health, and we did some focus groups on what were women thinking, basically.
mm-hmm.
And there was a good portion of, again, if we go back to the idea of 70% of Americans are actually pro-choice, and we go back to that wedge of women and 1 in 3 women have had an abortion, we go back to that group of women who voted for Donald Trump, there's a huge portion of them that had an abortion and are pro-choice. Mm-hmm. So we can talk to them. And there was a really interesting, there were interesting perspectives. They were, first of all, they said, well, we don't vote on that issue. We vote on the economy. So again, that says to me that we've just not been talking about the idea of reproductive freedom as an economic issue, which it 100% is. And so that's one of our responsibilities as a movement to start talking about that in a different way that is accessible and understandable. The second thing is that they are having so many challenges in their lives, and these were women in Ohio and Virginia. It was unemployment, it was access to jobs, it was the opioid addiction, that they just needed somebody to do something. And the third issue was, he just has to say that he's anti-choice, but we don't really think that he is. That no, he isn't. That he's not going to actually do anything. So that's an interesting take, and we can go down a lot of different rabbit holes on that particular perspective. There's some neuroscience work that I've studied through the Center for Partnership Studies, as well as a lot of work with George Lakoff, which is there are a lot of people that, and we can see a lot of research that has said people who supported Donald Trump have a wiring for authoritarianism. Mm-hmm. If you look at the neuroscience in that perspective, you see that a lot of people who would be able to vote for Donald Trump and forget or deny the things that he says or does that would actually hinder their well-being is definitely reflective on the communities, the families, the experience, the psychological structure of a lot of these voters. And you can look a little deeper into their family structures and their relationship to authority, and you can see how, even though this strong male character is saying X, Y, or Z thing, the ability for to put that into context requires a certain amount of psychological denial. And so we have to honor that. We have to honor that. We have to have compassion for the struggles of people in all of America. We have to look at those voters for Donald Trump and say, wow, we missed the pain. How can we be compassionate, enlightened people and miss this pain? We were asleep in our urban, educated, elitist bubbles, wherever we might be sitting. I'm really grateful to have had the experience of growing up in Nebraska and not being surprised at all about what happened in this election. Not at all. So, now is when we have to look at ourselves too and say what work needs to be done. What work really needs to be done.
Yeah, I think it's real. There's such a strong partisan divide at this point in time. Whatever you want to call it, East Coast, West Coast, the coast, the Middle America, flyover country, with all these terms which sometimes get used ad nauseum. But it's how do we bridge that gap? How do we find the issues that can help bridge people, heal people, and keep the demagogues out of the business of people coming together.
And I think a lot of the struggle that we have is that we're really trying to look at human beings to try to change their minds. What we have to really accept is that we've completely abandoned the systems that hurt them, hurt us, I should say. So we have to be really looking at, again, foundational solutions to these problems, which is healthcare, which is mental health care, which is the economy, which is jobs. Jobs aren't being taken away by immigrants. They're being taken away by robots, and being honest about that. Yeah. What are we going to do when self-driving cars puts all of the Teamsters out of business? What are we going to do? And those are the things we need to be focusing on, and we're not. What we're doing is pointing our fingers and saying, those people who voted for Trump are X, Y, or Z. And the fact of the matter is, we as a Democratic Party, or as people that call ourselves compassionate or enlightened or whatever we call ourselves, and that wasn't necessarily true because we weren't putting our money, we weren't putting our political pressure into systems of care, well-being, and service. So I have focused my attention on access for half the planet for proper reproductive health care services. But there are a lot of people that need to be looking at other aspects of early childhood education and particularly economic well-being, which is related to reproductive health care access. But, everybody's got to take up their mantle.
Yeah, there are all these. There's a thread that connects all these issues. Do you think you've worked on 6 political presidential campaigns?
Yeah.
So do you think transformation can come through the political system, or is it more bottom up, where people working on the different issues, or is there some combination of the two?
It has to come. Listen, we have to get really honest about this. It has to come through the political system. It has to. It must, because those are the people who are making decisions about where our money goes. Let's be serious. Like, these are the people sitting on the school board, or the state legislature, or the city council, or in Congress, obviously, or President of the United States. We have not been stepping into service in those areas, and we must. We must. And it really is dark, and it's ugly, and it's gross, and it's yucky. But why do we meditate if we're not willing to walk into the fire? Why are we not willing to walk into that darkness and transform it? We have to. Or it takes over. That's what's happened.
Yeah.
So we must engage politically. We must. We have no choice.
Yeah.
We must run for office. And I'm really glad, since the election and the organizations that I work with, VoteRunLead, Emerge America, and I've also heard an Emily's List, we've had almost 8,000 people sign up women run for office.
No, that's awesome, because as I said earlier, a lot of people have become cynical about the system, and it's led to apathy, and we have such poor voter turnout on the presidential elections, and people need to be engaged, civically involved, in various ways, from local to national. And Heidi, yourself, I mean, you're very articulate, bright, and have been immersed in politics almost as a family business. Do you ever think of yourself running?
Oh, absolutely. I have to.
Yeah.
A lot of it is about how can I be of service? Where am I properly, where can I properly be placed to serve and with whatever the experience that I have. My intention was to run in San Francisco. I took myself out of that mix about 5 years ago. So now it's really another process of where can I best be served. I'm looking at engaging more in the Democratic Party right now in New York, just to get the lay of the land there. But there's a lot of opportunity in all areas of government. Yeah. I like city government, so I think it's how you really impact people. And I'm really interested in how can we start there.
Yeah, well, all politics is local, so
yeah.
Well, that's great. I hope to know how it goes, or know more. Yeah.
Well, let you know. I'll hit you up for some money.
All right. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, where do you see your vision for the direction you take in your work? But I think you answered it. The political.
It's not about me. Like the vision of the work that I do is about engaging more women to be able to step into service, into political service. They're voting with more information. They're stepping into elected office. Like, this is not just about me. It's about this half the planet that is needing to show their power and really help step into those positions of leadership and transform us.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I think, in a way, what you're saying is you may do both ways in running for office, but even more so, you're helping to empower the wave, women, people becoming engaged, and people understanding, how can we transform our system and our society in a positive way.
And it's having tools to make it easier.
Yeah, so your vision is there, and your heart and integrity are there. So Heidi, if people want to know more about your work, is there a best website? You mentioned the CTZNWELL, or is there any place that would be best?
There's the website that my website is VoteProChoice.us. VoteProChoice.us. Yeah. And I also encourage folks that do have a spiritual practice to check out CTZNWELL. It's CTZNWELL.org. They're both really great platforms. On Vote Pro Choice, you're going to get really hardcore political action around reproductive rights and women in leadership. And on CTZNWELL, you're going to see a platform of well-being where you can find ways to support action that reflect your values. As you step onto the mat, you better be ready to step off the mat and be of service.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I met you. You were a panelist at the Citizen Giant conference in early February, the conference in D.C. that Marianne Williamson put together and Bernie Sanders keynoted at. And that was really about, and Marianne Williamson, in talking to the large crowd there, said that the people into personal transformation have to take the next step. It's not just about them, but it's how do we integrate this mindset into society and change consciousness.
Yeah, demonstrate. And I really am. That's why I really do appreciate her perspective. It is I'll be honest. It is utterly selfish for those of us who might engage in these practices of well-being Be it, you're really devoted to your yoga practice, or you've taken yoga teacher training, or a like avid meditator, or macrobiotic eater, or you buy Prii, however you would say it, or live your life green, and you don't engage politically.
Absolutely.
We just don't. We cannot tolerate that anymore. We've all got to step into into civic engagement and leadership.
Yeah, right on. So that's well said. So I want to thank you, Heidi. This is great,
Thank you.
and I really appreciate you taking the time and helping inspire people for this new wave, this next wave of activism in the world.
It's all a journey.
Yeah, it certainly is. So thank you so much, and
thank you.
and I'm just going to stop the recording now, and I'll chat with you a few more moments. Okay, thanks.